And the reason you need an air dryer is when you compress air, it gets hot. If you have moist air going in, you're compressing that air and moisture. When it cools off, it's going to make water. So the compressor compresses the air. We have moist air, goes through the air dryer. The dryer pulls most of the water out of the air. You can't get it all, but it does a really good job. And the filter actually catches the oil that's in the air. Typically a dryer or a compressor won't leak much oil by, but if it does, the air dryer will catch it and you won't have an issue with oil in your tanks. So in order to replace these parts, you have to completely drain the air system. So we're going to do that. We got our tools laid out. We've gone to Freightliner. We got a new filter. We got a new governor. We got tools laid out here so I can easily get what I need. So I'm gonna get to the drain cables. Every truck is in a different place, but you have these two cables right here. As you can hear, you just pull on them. It's gonna take a little while, but that's how you drain the air tank. Just hold these valves open, and like I said, it'll take a few minutes. You got the air drained. Takes quite a while if you drain it through the tanks. You can actually get up in the truck and pump the brakes down, but I like to actually pull the drain valves out of the tanks. That way it gets any extra moisture out of the tanks if there is any. So these filters are on really tight, and I had a big pair of channel locks and I thought they would work, but the filter's too big to go around them. So I had to go purchase a filter tool just to change this filter. It's like $18 for this filter wrench. So using a 1/2-inch breakover, just it's a spin-on filter just like an oil filter. Once you get her loose, just unscrew it, and there you go. And you can kind of see how there's a lot of moisture in there. And wow. So we'll wipe that out before we put the new one on. But the moisture is out of the air when it compresses. It's hot. So if you're driving in wet climates or whatever the case may be, it's going to pull the moisture out of the air and compress it. So as the air cools, that moisture is going to fall out, and that's the job of the air dryer. So we're going to replace this O-ring as well. It comes with the new filter. Whatever you got for a rag will work fine. There's a hole back in here, and this is how the air, whenever you hear the compressor turn off, you hear the air purge. Well, it's actually taking the moisture down through this hole and actually spitting it out of the bottom of the dryer. And the dryer is supposed to have enough volume in it to allow the air that's in the system to cool off enough to cause that moisture to fall out of it. The filter was about $80, and it really doesn't, I mean, it does a lot. So every other year is probably enough, unless you're running real wet climates. Then maybe you might think about it a little more often. But
what happens if you don't change it?
It'll load up, and it'll just, I suppose.
Is there any special way you put that O-ring on?
No, it just goes right on there.
Okay.
Stop it. I've always kept O-ring lube. You can use Vaseline or about whatever you have, just something to lubricate the O-ring. It just helps everything seal.
Oh, you're putting it up there too?
I don't suppose it's probably really mandatory, but I just like to put it on. That way I'm sure I got a good seal. Make sure you got some on the O-ring. That way when you spin this thing on, everything's going to seal up just right. I don't think there's any need of really using the wrench to tighten it up. It's not going to come loose for sure.
So does it just get tighter going down the road to why you need the wrench to take it off?
Yeah. Well, age and as things, you know, we've lubricated the O-rings, that lube will dry up and then it'll create a good seal. And once it's sealed and stuck, it's there.
Okay.
That's
right.
Changing the filter on the air dryer. Next, we'll change the air governor itself. So we got a kit from our local Freightliner, and within that kit, it comes with everything we need: new bolts, the new governor, everything. So we got a 3/8 drive ratchet, a 12mm socket, or a 10mm socket, excuse me. Okay, this is the shooting the underside. This right here is the governor. This is the piece we're going to change. It's got 2 bolts, one here, one here. And like I said, it's a 10mm. You can see the 2 bolts from the top, but I moved the camera down underneath so you could see. So that is the air governor. It comes right off. Like I said, we got new bolts, new gaskets. This is the gasket. We'll have to replace this gasket. It comes right off. Real easy. Just make sure it's nice and clean here. And I do not use any kind of gasket sealer or anything like that. The gasket itself will do all the sealing for us. Okay, so we've got the old governor off. I got the new governor. I got the 2 new bolts through it. I laid the gasket on. You've got to make sure those holes are lined up. The bolt holes are larger than the ports for the governor. I went through and made sure all these plugs are tight, which they were. Coming from the factory, I would have expected that. And then it just bolts right back on where it came from. This thing will only fit one way. Okay, so I've started the bolts. You can see the gasket is still where it needs to be. It's just a matter of tightening the bolts. There is a torque spec. It comes with the in the instructions. I don't actually have a torque wrench that'll go down this low, so I am just going to make sure the bolts are tight. And you got to remember, you're going into an aluminum housing, so you can strip them, so be careful. Tighten the 2 bolts. The governor's ready to go back to work.
Oh.
So as I said, I like to take the drain plug out of the drain valve out of the air tank, and once I got the governor changed, I started the truck just to blow out any air that was in the tank. And you can see, even though the drain valve was not producing any moisture, that's how much moisture came out of the truck just running maybe a minute. So they do produce quite a bit of moisture, even though, so once in a while it might not be a bad idea to pull the drain valve out of the rear valve on the air tank.
Which one is that?
This tank here is actually separated. You can see a weld right here, and this part of it is called the wet tank. So that's where all the moisture gathers before it goes into the other tanks.
Is that where the valve goes in?
Yeah.
On the end right there.
And it screws in right here.
Okay.
Just make sure you get those back in and get them back in tight.
Do you hand tighten them or use a wrench?
No, you have to use a wrench. .11/16 wrench on most of them. It's a 3/8 pipe plug. They do make an electric drain valve that will screw in here and
automatically purge every time the air dryer does, and it's electric, so it's heated. So in the wintertime, there's no ice buildup.
How come we don't have one of those?
I don't want to mess with the power, running power. So
about how long has this project taken?
With draining the air tanks like we did, probably 10 or 15 minutes. Other than having to go to the parts store to get the filter wrench. But it is something, you know, if you're setting a weekend or whatever and you think about it, it is a good preventive maintenance thing. It keeps your system dry, and replacing that governor every other year or so is a good idea, just because it works all the time. You know, every time, you know, as long as the truck's running, it's working. If it does quit working, you'll either overpressure the system, or typically it won't allow the compressor to come on. So you'll just continually lose air pressure, lose as your suspension works, your seat works, your suspension on your cab. If you have an automated manual transmission like the DT12, it shifts with air. So you'll just keep running out of air until finally you don't have enough air to keep moving. And you will get your low air warning, and that means you need to get pulled over. The system, it's a fail-safe system with your braking system, so the brakes won't lock up.
Is it something mechanics check when you go in for a PM?
They don't check it for a PM, but they do test it during a DOT inspection. That's why they have you pump the brakes down to make sure your valves pop out, your emergency valves pop out, and also that you pump it down to make sure your low air buzzer comes on before the valves pop out.
So the last thing you want to learn during a DOT inspection is that this isn't working.
Correct. But, I mean, you would know it before you got to your DOT inspection.
Hopefully.
Because you're going to be running out of air. It just won't make any new air. So, until next time, be safe out there.